Tonight on Denver7 News at 10, a chilling view from the front lines of the deadly riot at the Capitol.
We're still taking rocks, bottles, and pieces of flag and metal poles.
Impeachment managers lay out never-before-seen footage showing the vice president and members of Congress rushing out moments before a violent mob broke in.
We lost the line. We lost the line.
If they had found Speaker Pelosi, they would have killed her.
Democratic impeachment managers work to connect the dots between President Trump's words and the actions of his most extreme supporters.
Democrats are trying to steal the White House. You cannot let them.
The evidence that has been presented thus far is pretty damning.
But Democrats face an uphill battle trying to convince more than a dozen Republicans that Donald Trump's actions deserve a conviction.
Tonight, we're taking a 360 look at the impeachment trial, breaking down multiple perspectives on the case against the former president. Tonight, a new perspective on the chaos at the Capitol, exactly 5 weeks after a violent mob stormed the building.
Security footage from inside the building shows how rioters smashed their way in and came within feet of members of Congress and their staff.
And new body camera footage shows the brutal struggle Capitol Police faced that day, trying to fend off the mob. Welcome to Denver7 News at 10. I'm Andrew Heel.
And I'm Shannon Ogden. We're glad you're with us tonight. There is a lot to unpack on day 2 of the former President Trump's impeachment trial.
That's right. Tonight we are taking a 360, exploring multiple perspectives on the case against former President Trump. Today, Democratic impeachment managers focused on the timeline. They showed former Vice President Pence being escorted out of the Senate chambers with his family as rioters breached the building. They highlighted the very real danger of that moment.
Vice President Pence was threatened with death by the president's supporters because he rejected President Trump's demand that he overturn the election.
Impeachment managers also showed footage of senators running to escape and congressional staffers rushing into conference rooms before barricading themselves.
And Colorado Congressman Joe Neguse is one of the impeachment managers. And today he worked to highlight former President Trump's words in the lead up to that riot. Neguse pointed to tweets and campaign speeches over the course of months in which Trump cast doubt on the legitimacy of the election. And on the day of the riot, he gave this rallying call to a crowd of supporters in Washington.
And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Well, Neguse said it's telling that even after the violent insurrection began, it took hours for President Trump to come out and tell people to go home.
They didn't stop in the face of law enforcement, police officers fighting for their lives to stop them. They were following the president. He alone, our commander-in-chief, had the power to stop him. And he didn't.
Today, impeachment managers also focused on the words of someone who worked with the former president. John Kelly served as Trump's chief of staff for about 18 months, and this was his take the day after the riots.
The president knows who he's talking to when he tweets or when he makes statements. He knows who he's talking to, and he knows what he wants them to do. And the fact that he said the things he's been saying, the things he's been saying since the election, and encouraging people, no surprise again at what happened.
But the president's defense team did not take the floor today. They'll get to make up their case after the Democrats finish, and that could start tomorrow, maybe Friday. And CNN reports tonight the team plans to hit back by saying House impeachment managers are, quote, glorifying violence with their recreation of the Capitol riot. They'll also argue that Democrats took Trump's comments out of context.
And of course, what really matters here is whether the arguments can sway senators' votes. Several Republicans are seen as potential swing votes, including Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski. She said seeing videos from that day in the Capitol hit hard.
We're reliving this. We lived it once, and that was awful. I don't see how Donald Trump could be reelected to the presidency again.
And when asked for their reactions, other Republican senators use words like riveting, compelling, heart-wrenching, and disgusting. Some Republicans say impeachment managers weren't convincing when it came to tying the actions of the rioters to Trump. 67 votes are needed for a conviction. That means impeachment managers have to sway 17 Republicans. And keep in mind, just 6 Republicans joined Democrats for a total of 56 in voting that the impeachment trial is constitutional. It is not clear if any more Republicans were swayed by today's arguments.
And as tough as that day was for members of Congress, Capitol Police are still reeling from the violence they faced that day. Chilling radio calls from the day detail how the mob hit officers with rocks and bottles, metal poles, and sprayed them with mace.
The crowd is using munitions against us. They have bear spray in the crowd. Bear spray in the crowd. So we lost the line. We lost the line. All MPD, pull back. All MPD, pull back up to the upper deck.
More than 140 officers were hurt that day. One died from injuries, and then days later, a second officer died by suicide. The Hill reports that members of U.S. Capitol Police plan to hold a vote of no confidence in their leadership this week. Union leaders say huge failures in leadership planning and responsibility leave them with no choice.
So impeachment managers have 16 hours over 2 days to make their case. Tomorrow, they will pick up where they left off. The Senate reconvenes tomorrow at noon. We will, of course, have complete coverage right here on Denver7.
Well, we have heard complaint after complaint from those living near the Suncor Refinery. They say they've suffered enough, and even though the plant's been around for decades, residents say the pollution is getting worse.
And case in point today, a surprise industrial snow that fell on their yards after Suncor and nearby refineries vented steam. And now the state's deciding whether to renew the plant's operating permit.
As Denver7 Sloan Dickey reports tonight, residents are calling for more accountability.
William Clay
I try to do brakes myself because
takes his family's safety into his own hands.
that's what saves their life.
But when it comes to environmental safety,
Suncor is right to the southwest of us.
there's not much he can do.
Suncor's had a few problems the last couple years.
Right now, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment is deciding whether to renew Suncor's operating permit. The Title V permit has to be renewed every 5 years. It regulates the type and amount of pollutants that can be released into the atmosphere. But for neighbors of the plant, this past year has been particularly difficult.
You see the clouds, and then it just kind of comes over, and you go, what's that?
Last year, ash clouds released from the refinery settled over neighboring communities.
It's like a soot, basically.
And neighbors say the smell from the refinery is getting worse.
Like a lot of Coloradans, I like having my windows open, and especially at night. And about, like she said, 11 o'clock, between 11 and 1, it's just like clockwork. It just stinks.
The state says the permit will likely be renewed.
It's not a great way to necessarily dialogue around issues. It doesn't do a great job in finding ways to improve performance at the facility, to find rules and regulations that actually reduce the environmental impacts from the facility.
But the goal of the permit renewal, regulators say, is to slowly cut down on emissions.
You know, I don't think that you're ever going to see a year where you don't have some problems at the facility. It's a complex facility, and you know, it's consistent with how other refineries operate. So what we expect is improvement.
For many neighbors of the refinery, the Suncor plant means jobs and income.
Suncor has been here forever. It's part of the community. I believe it's what built the community, was built around it.
But others say if they can't clean up their actions,
If they can't clean up how they're doing and what they're doing, then, you know, just for the safety of the neighborhood and the citizens here in Commerce City, they need to move.
it may be time for them to move on.
Now, Denver7 has reached out to Suncor for comment on the permitting process, but has not heard back. But just today, the company is dealing with its own environmental issues, and it has to do with that massive flame that you see behind me. The company said in a statement earlier today that it experienced a leak in some of its refining equipment, and that you will likely see flaring from the facility as they figure out what went wrong. Now, as to the permit, there is a public comment period that opens on February 17th for that Title V permit for the operating, and it will be open for 30 days. Reporting live in Commerce City, Sloan Dickey, Denver7.
All right, Sloan, thank you. Well, as we rush to get coronavirus vaccinations into arms, we have a new warning tonight. This shot might be an annual shot. The CEO of Johnson & Johnson told CNN that people may need to get vaccinated against the virus every year for the next several years. And he pointed to the rise of the mutations in the virus and said we might have to treat this like the flu shot every year. It comes amid growing confidence, though, in the vaccine. There's a new Gallup poll that finds 71% of people now in the U.S. are willing to get vaccinated. That's up from 65% just in late December. So far, about 10% of Americans have received at least one dose of the vaccine.
And getting the vaccine distributed out into the neighborhoods is a top priority for Colorado right now, and clinics are starting to pop up. Now in Aurora, Tri-County Health is partnering with Stride Health Center to hold a vaccination clinic in the parking garage of the Hyatt Regency on East 14th Place on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if you live nearby and you want to get a shot, you need to sign up first on Stride Health's website, and then staff will reach out to you to schedule an appointment.
Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor COVID. A Denver7 viewer, Donald, wrote to us today asking, when are postal workers going to get the vaccine? A great question. Actually, I've been wondering the same thing myself. So I did some digging for you this afternoon, Donald, and found that postal workers now are listed under Colorado's Phase 1B3. So that's going to be the group after the one we just started. The estimated start date for your group, March 5th. So hang on just a little bit longer, and on behalf of all of us, thank you very much for doing your job so dependably through all this madness.
Oh yeah, we appreciate our postal carriers. We know many of you are frustrated waiting to be vaccinated, and our state is making progress. About half of all Coloradans aged 70 and older have received at least one dose of the coronavirus vaccine, and the plan is to vaccinate at least 70% of that group by the end of this month. So while you wait for that all-important shot, there is new advice on how to best protect yourself. The CDC says wearing 2 masks at the same time can really help. A new study found wearing a cloth mask over a surgical one can help. Just make sure that it's snug around the edges to keep particles from getting in.
A very personal connection to the city he serves.
When you're on the street level, you are the very first initial contact with these people.
We're meeting the born and raised Denver officer setting an example and putting his deep knowledge of the city to good use on patrol.
Yeah, it's going to be a cold one tonight, but trust me, you haven't seen anything yet.
And a miles-long tunnel to bypass Vail. We're taking a look at one of the wildest ideas on paper for how to cut down traffic noise in the ski town.